Rikart held his gorge, but only barely. Even he. Didonus, the priest, did not miss a beat, a single footstep, as he steadily walked to the circles and glyphs that surrounded the smear on reality. A rent as tall as the doors, some 50 feet high and 20 wide. A glaring red eye of fire that was the centre of this sin. He took out his water flask, and liturgies issued from him as he splashed it on the ground and removed the glyphs there one by one. But some minutes later, the rent still stood. The gate was not closed. Rikart leaned on his sword as he watched. He had multiple cracked ribs, a smashed left arm. He was feeling every second of his long life right now. The fatigue was crushing, yet he stood. "So, what now?" he stated flatly to Didonus. "Lord Commissar, you have fought well. The Emperor is pleased," barked the priest. "Very nice. Now, you've gotten rid of all of the filthy heretic icons. So why is the gate still open? What now?" "Yes, I must pray. The Emperor will guide our hand indeed." And with that, Didonus knelt and began to mutter. His men formed up around him, some standing in a line some 20 foot from the gate and advancing to slay the occasional demon that was blurted out into reality. But they were few and individual now. Didonus continued to pray to the god Emperor, the master of mankind, for guidance. After what seemed like an eternity, the priest, Didonus, ceased his muttering and went silent. Only moments later, he then stood up. He turned to Rikart and nodded. "His light has suffused me. I know what must be done. Care to share? The unclean do not issue from the gate now as we are present. Our light shines too brightly for them to endure," he said as he waved to indicate his paladins, his most holy crusader knight. "But the gate was opened by sacrifice. It can only be closed by the same. Where the evil ones sacrificed the unwilling pure for the coin to open this rift, so must they be closed by the sacrifice of pure who are willing." Bemused, Rikart shrugged as an indicant of his confusion. Didonus then turned on the spot and locked eyes with each of his crusaders one after the other as he spoke. "We are the righteous. We are the pure. We have served our Emperor, our God, for all our days. We have cut down evil this day. We have crushed them beneath our zealous boots. But now, we are truly blessed. Our path, shown to us by the Emperor himself. His wisdom our boon, his love our armor, his wrath our sword. He has spoken. For we will not just close this gate. We will not just thwart the forces of evil. We shall punish them for ever setting foot in our realms. Forward, my paladins. Follow me, for we shall take our righteous light into the very flames of hell, and purge and purify there." And with that, the paladins formed up ceremonially at either side of their priest. He turned and bowed slightly to Rikart, then extended his hand and beckoned. "Rikart, warrior of light, it seems unjust and unfair that you should be the one to make this possible, to fight a way to this space and this time, only to be left aside at the last. So, wilt thou join us?" At that, all eyes were on the old Commissar. He looked on for a moment, as it sank in. Then he looked at his left leg, the knee that always gave him jip, the broken arm, the old boots. His attention concentrated on his boots now. He could not fathom why, but as he looked upon them, he had an epiphany. They were worn, they were broken. Scuffed and battered they had always been, but today, right now, they seemed so threadbare, almost ready to fall apart if but one more stitch was unpicked. Their soles so worn that they would open his feet to the ground in areas if not replaced. Rikart could see a collection of the Born Third from the periphery of his vision, or shaking their heads slowly and mouthing no, no. But the boots. They could not take much more. Better to take one more final journey than be thrown onto the scrap heap, to fall apart at the one time that they would be needed most. The boots. As the priest leered at him, Rikart felt the pull. His gaze went from the men of the Third Born, and then back to the priest in indecision, an emotion, a state of being Rikart had not experienced in decades. Rikart looked at the gateway, the passage into hell, and took one involuntary step forward. For he had never once in his life walked away from a challenge. But it was what he heard, when his foot slammed down, the old boot with their metal tips and heels resounding so loudly. It was what he heard after that. A collected moan, low, almost disguised, reserved. In other words, utterly unconscious as well. A sound that had been ripped from 200 unwilling throats and chests around him. His men and women of the Born. Rikart looked at the gateway, the terrible doorway into hell, then squared his shoulders and did the hardest thing he had ever done in his life. He sighed. His head went down as he shook it slowly from side to side in a clear negative. He looked up again and straight into the eyes of Didonus and his knights, still shaking his head. He twitched his smashed arm instinctively, then switched to the other and gave the sharpest and most indulgent salute to the priest and his men. No, with all my heart, I want to go with you. My arm as it is, my fatigue as it is. I would stand at your side and bring the Emperor's light to the darkness, to bring his holy peace to the unclean. But I cannot. For this attack, this invasion, was set off to prevent my men and women getting where they need to be. I can see that now. For we are to head to a war that there has not been the like since, well, if all reports are accurate at my clearance, its like has not been seen in millennia. We may very well be fighting to keep out the servants of evil from this realm, the Imperium. As it stands, I am needed here, on this side of the gate, to prevent that, said Rikart, pointing clearly at the portal, from entering into the Emperor's blessed realm. Perhaps we shall meet again, Didonus. Fight hard. Save me a place in the hunt. For when this campaign is done, if there is any way at all, I shall join you. Rikart's last words were drowned by the cheers of the Born regiment around him, then the clang of metal on shield, as the holy knights rang out their own salute in response to his ardor. The priest winked at the Commissar. I guarantee nothing. He stroked his huge two-handed eviscerated chainsword. There may not be many left by that time, but you will always be welcome among our number. No matter where we fight the enemies of the Emperor, your place will always be assured. At that, the priest raised his blade in both hands and revved it as he walked into the gateway, hymnals roaring and his knights following him. Straight into the gate, straight into hell. And when the last of them passed the shimmering portal, it snapped shut, winds exploding from it and knocking all present to the ground. Rikart was offered help, but refused it and rose himself, despite his tattered arm. The medics hovered, until he had barked orders to the men around him to secure the city and bring back order, slaying anything remaining. For none could be clean after living through this horror. They would have to receive the Emperor's peace. Then, and only then, did he permit the medics to attend him. Hours later, Rikart was transported back to the main base, Harker awaiting him in the command tent. But he did not process there immediately. He detoured to the opposite end of the camp first, marching with purpose, head held high. No jokes responded to, no salutes returned. He was on mission from the Emperor himself, from his very god. The Commissar swept through the doors to the Munitorium building. The two clerks there snapped to attention and gulped as he bore down on them. He marched perfectly to the counter, and then bent over. He rummaged for a short time, then rose again, placing 2 old boots on the counter. Rikart then glared at the clerks who stood there dumbfounded. The ragged, tattered boots were polished, but caked in blood, grit and mud, and practically falling apart. Rikart leaned the top half of his body forward over the counter and sneered at the clerks, who very swiftly broke from looking at the boots. They both stepped back at the 2 words spat at them by the Commissar. "New boots!" Whitening, the 2 clerks then turned and fled into the stockrooms. Falling over each other to perform the task, they took 1 boot each and searched for the perfect match. Moments later, Rikart strode back out of the building. He stepped outside, looking at the brilliant dawn, and just rocked his weight from his heels to his toes and back again. The new boots squealed as he did so. He looked down into them and saw his own reflection shone back through the perfectly bulled steel caps. He did not see the silver at his temples, the grey in his brows. All he saw was a warrior of the Imperium. Stamping his right leg, he decided a new knee was in order. Things were going to get rough on Abundance Tertius, and he wanted to be at his best for the party. Continued in December, in Abundance Tertius, Episode 1. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and organizations of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. Now, I have been setting up Abundance Tertius for quite some time now, so this is one last little, aside, one last little nugget put in place for the first episode next month, near Christmas, I would imagine, and certainly hope. So a short piece today to conclude that, dangling thread, and know that the decision of the viewers, of you, the gentle listeners, was to have Rikart go to Abundance Tertius. Now, before we conclude, I would like to show you something that is quite fun. I met a wonderful chap at a convention recently, and he's making what I consider some exquisite models that could be proxied in many different situations, many different games, or even just owned for the beauty of them. So here is a little intro to his latest Kickstarter. Alas, it is only open until tomorrow, the 16th of November 2021. But if you catch this video later on, do go to have a look at his present wares. He is a brand new company, very young, and I intend to be opening up a potential partnership with him for a few interesting projects. So do go have a look. But now, let us see this wonderful Kickstarter. Mortal's Reckoning, from Cerberus Studios. Archon Sakul. Archon Sakul. Archon of the city of Amos, master charioteer, and commander of the feared Sirocco. Harking from the sandy dunes of Amos, Sakul is a fearsome warlord, swearing his fealty to the Lord of War, the Kyrios. Sakul has run down the enemies of his king across battlefields beyond count, riding at the head of his personally trained war chariots, the Sirocco, striking fear into all who stand against them. But these chariots and warriors pale in comparison to the sheer violence and intimidation that is Sakul and his personal war chariot. Drawn by 4 huge war horses, these maddened beasts are living extensions of Sakul himself. Fear the rumbling sound in the distance, for Sakul is coming for you. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed the conclusion to this brief tale. Well, this leg of it anyway. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.